like I said, it's an honor and pleasure to talk to you in person. You've given us an enormous amount of information on the phone.
Yes.
Those great 45 minutes. But I'd like to recap some of the
Okay.
more important things. Most specifically, the fact that you and your passion is writing. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, I've just learned in all the years of being involved in the creative process, most of the time as an actor, that your work and the time that you spend in front of a camera or doing anything about your craft depends on the other people, whether they want you for a part, whether you're right for a part. There's so many variables, so you end up really, for a very short period of time doing the thing that you love to do. And so actors mostly try to do stage or take acting classes or anything they can fill the time with. But, it's in the end, there's really not that much time in front of a camera. And I find that I'm happiest creating. And so to me, writing is really the perfect, I think also because my brain tends to be a little bit obsessive. So just having all that kind of time to, writing to me is like a puzzle. So you start a project, you start thinking about the entire, storyline and what you can do, and then it becomes these layers upon layers, and it's this puzzle that needs to all work together. And one thing you change affects another one, and so to me, it's the best use of my creative energy. I can do it by myself. I don't have to rely on other people. I can do it as, at the hours that I want to do it. I can do it as long and obsessively as I want to do it. And, it's just a wonderful experience, just me and my brain, and I just love it.
Okay, well now talk about the inspiration for Bobby. So you got the words on paper. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, the inspiration was really a combination of two things, and that was being a foreigner in the United States. I came here when I was about 18 years old for the first time. I was born and raised in Holland, and then I lived in New York for the majority of the time. But a visit to Oklahoma really kind of sparked the idea for bringing up Bobby, because I just realized that it reminded me so much of old movies that I've been very influenced by, like, Bonnie and Clyde and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and Thelma and Louise and Harold and Maude and all these movies that were set in that type of environment that Oklahoma has, and it has something very innocent and beautiful, and there's a time warp that you really feel like you're in. You could be in 2010 or you could be in 1975, and it's all kind of makes sense. And that so it was like, like, what's it like being a foreigner? What's it like to live out the American dream as a foreigner? And then especially what's it like being a foreigner who's influenced by movies and then tries to live out that version of the American dream, which is basically thinking you're Bonnie from Bonnie and Clyde. And that's kind of how the whole thing came together.
Well, the characters you describe are anti-heroes, and that's the way you wrote Mila's character,
Yes.
Olive. Olive's trying to raise a young son, and she's like the anti-heroes, but she's trying to fix herself at the end, and I think that's an important distinction.
Yes.
So talk a little bit about making somebody who's an anti-hero, trying to get the audience behind them, even though what they're doing is not very enviable.
Yeah, and I think in this case, that was why films like Bonnie and Clyde and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and Harold and Maude and all of those, and Thelma and Louise, all of those movies really played a very large part in structuring the film. The setup of it is just like in those films. There are a bunch of people who, they're always a duo, who do illegal things, and we love to kind of, we love them despite the fact that they're, they're con artists of sorts. And so that was really the setup. And then knowing that they're sitting on a time bomb, because in all of those movies, that Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid are not going to get away with it. That Bonnie and Clyde are not going to get away with it. That with Harold and Maude, something has to go wrong. And Thelma and Louise, of course, the end of those movies are, not pretty most of the time, but it's literally a bloodbath of sorts. And so that whole sense of like, we're sitting on a time bomb, something's going to happen, that was used structurally for the story, is that, when you raise your child as a con artist, even if you think you're giving your child better opportunities.
Hmm.
We know as an audience right away that something is going to go wrong sooner or later, and that was kind of, the whole setup of this story. And then yes, that means that you have an anti-hero, and you hope that people in the end will like your character in the way that they liked Bonnie from Bonnie and Clyde, or all the other people I just referenced. But that's the challenge, of course.
Okay. Can you talk about writing for a child? You wrote for Spencer
Yeah.
List, who played Bobby.
Mm-hmm.
Was it difficult, writing a story that was, about a 10 or 12-year-old boy?
No, it was actually really fun, and these are I think the interesting things about the creative process. I don't have kids myself. I have nieces. I'm not around kids that age group all that much, but it's just and I've always loved that about acting too. I always felt that in order to play a drug addict, I didn't have to go out and see what that was like, and I could just imagine it. And so the same way with writing for Bobby, with the character of Bobby, he's a kid, but somehow I found his voice by just in my head somewhere. It's probably just life experience, looking around, meeting people. Subconsciously, all this stuff gets stored somewhere in that brain, and then it comes out one day.
Comes out, yeah.
Yep.
Well, now, aside from Spencer, who did a great job as Bobby, you got Mila Jovovich, you got Bill Pullman, and Marcia Cross.
Right.
How did they get on board?
All different ways. Mila Jovovich was, we went to her agent and manager, and we were lucky enough to get her. And Bill Pullman was neighbors with my producing partner, Sophia Sondervan, and so I had dinner with him several times, and we got the script to him, and that's how he came on board. Marcia Cross and I took some acting classes 100 years ago together, and we went to her manager, and so she. Sorry, almost. We can't see.
Everybody, this is
things
Licorice.
other than-
This
is
is
Licorice, who can't see very well
Yeah.
anymore, so
And we
shadows
might not even be
kinda
on-
spook him a little bit. And then Roy Cochran has been my best friend since our first movie together, so I actually wrote the part for him, the part of Walt. Right now, I'm still doing the festival tour. I just finished 2 movies that I starred in because I had to go back and try to make some money to afford being a writer-director,
Uh-huh.
which still doesn't pay the bills yet. So I'm coming out in Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunters opposite Jeremy Renner, and Taken 2 opposite Liam Neeson.
Okay.
We just wrapped those 2 films, and then I start a project called Hemlock Grove, which will be the second project that Netflix is doing as its original content, making their own.
Okay.
Yeah, streaming. And then I've written my next screenplay called Rio Rojo, and I'm going to hopefully direct that in my next hiatus.
Oh, excellent, excellent.
Yeah.
That's what you were telling me. You said in between, some down times when Bobby may not have, gotten made. You wrote
Yes.
some silly comedies, and then you wrote this.
And then I wrote a
Yeah,
series
uh-huh.
movie. Yeah, that is my big dream project right now. Another very ambitious project because, it seems to be the only way I get to do things. It's just by being extremely ambitious and trying to do things that, are way beyond what I'm capable of. Because this, it's written to be spoken in 3 different languages. So
Oh, wow,
that's the challenge, 2 of which I speak, but the third one I don't. So that should be a challenge.
Okay.
Alone right there.
Well, what kind of movies inspire you? Maybe not inspire. We've already talked about what inspires bringing up Bobby, but
Yeah.
what movies do you watch and what do you draw from?
It really are the movies that inspired bringing up Bobby that I watch over and over again. I think that for some reason I'm stuck on this 1930s and 1970s thing for 2 very specific and different reasons. 1930s is because it was the golden age for women in film, and they were really strong and funny and complicated and smart and silly as characters, and they really were the protagonist of the story in a way that we don't see it anymore now. And the 70s had this realism and beautiful cinematography and just a very different sensibility, but one that appeals to me very much. So those are still the movies that I keep revisiting. I try to watch everything that comes out and that's new, but I always seem to go back to my old standards that I love so much, and those are that time frame. And then a lot of documentaries, because I find that documentaries somehow are the new real stories, even though they're not fictional. They're they're real,
Mm-hmm.
but they're stranger than fiction somehow.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, and really fascinating stories that I've been watching for a long time now. So then they've inspired ideas for movies and all of that kind of stuff.
Okay. Any documentary that you've seen recently that you?
I just watched Paradise Lost 3. I'd seen the first two when they came out, and I've been obsessed with these movies, and I'm so happy these guys are finally out, even though they had to plead guilty to get out. But that's been, if you have never seen it, I highly recommend, but watch 1, 2, and 3 all in a row.
Okay, don't start with 3.
Oh
Okay.
my, well, you can actually, because it does kind of catch you up in the first 20 minutes of all the things that have been happening, but they're unreal.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, I think we've come to our last question. We're about running out of time. So I figured we'll have a little fun with this one.
Yeah.
People know you for either Xenia Onatopp or Jean Grey. And
Is that one of those questions, like who's going to win in a fight?
No. I was hoping, since we're here to help you promote, you're here to promote Bringing Up Bobby. I was hoping you can maybe look at the camera, and since this is my impression that Olive's, because she's Ukrainian, her accent is kind of similar to Xenia Onatopp's, who's Georgian. So I was wondering if you would just maybe look at the camera and pitch Bringing Up Bobby as Xenia.
I can't do that.
Totally don't have to. I mean, I know I
cannot
put you on the
remember
spot.
my accent, and that would be a really sad version of what that once was. That's been a really long time ago that I did that film. So no, but I would just say go see Bringing Up Bobby, because it's different, it's fun and exciting, and we got a great cast, and I hope you really enjoy it.
Excellent. I really look forward to your next feature. I got a lot out of our phone interview, and it took a while transcribing that because you gave a lot of information. But no, but it was good.
Once I get going, it's hard to stop.
Well, excellent. We're thrilled to have you in Dallas.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Best of luck to you.
Okay. You too.